The government's unveiled the first wave of funding for infrastructure projects it says will create 20,000 jobs. There was almost 2,000 applications for $3 billion that's part of the COVID Response and Recovery Fund. 150 projects have been approved in principle, but only a dozen of them were detailed today, including the Auckland City Mission apartment complex, Christchurch's Coastal Pathway, the East Coast Rugby Park Grandstand and the Blenheim Art Gallery. I spoke to Infrastructure Minister Shane Jones and asked him how many of the 20,000 jobs they were claiming credit for were actually new.
So the 12-month period that Mr Mark Binns identified, which is the drop-dead moment for these projects to have actually made genuine progress and employed people, will provide an opportunity to sustain companies that are already employing people but have been dislocated by the uncertainty post-COVID in the construction infrastructure sector. And I've found it quite confounding as to why the media continues to confuse what we're doing. And post-COVID, this $3 billion is an injection into the economy to enable jobs to continue. Now, inevitably, new jobs will be created because people from time to time will find are transitioning out of jobs that no longer exist and they're coming to work in infrastructure. And that's why it's really important for a lot of these projects that they hook in with the local training organisations and make the most out of the apprenticeship and vocational assistance packages.
I suppose, Minister, the point is the media is testing your claim because the press release doesn't say continuing jobs, it says creating jobs, creating more than 20,000 jobs. And it goes on to say this is about creating jobs. So can you actually give me a figure? Because the one you're using is 20,000 jobs. Are you creating 20,000 jobs or not?
Yeah, no, the 20,000 figure has come from the due diligence carried out by Crown Infrastructure Partners. Those jobs may very well not exist in the absence of $3 billion worth of infrastructure development at the level of community infrastructure right through to the big end of town. So if you do not have the injection of pūtea, then you will not be creating jobs. Jobs will wither and disappear in the absence of capital.
Because the thing is, let's take one project, for example, the Auckland City Mission, which you've announced $22 million funding for. This is for their home ground apartment project. That project's underway. It's in the final stages of completion, yet you're claiming credit for 200 jobs. Those jobs already exist, don't they?
And in actual fact, many of these projects are not going to be able to get to the finishing line unless the Crown comes in and helps underwrite that area of uncertainty. So that's actually a brilliant example where a project was started. As a consequence of COVID, it's been dislocated. With the certainty associated with the additional pūtea, not only will those jobs and the people working for the firms have a greater level of certainty, but the firms themselves can, quite frankly, make themselves more resilient. That's a key feature of the $3 billion pūtea.
Was that a direct criteria to get the pūtea? You had to prove that the project would not go ahead or would, fail unless they got money from you? Did they have to prove
some
that?
Of those, in some of the cases, which will be revealed as we roll out the majority of the other projects, but in some cases, people have appealed to Mr Binns and his committee that we're 2/3, 3/4 of the way. If you want us to turbocharge this, then can you work with us? We need some additional capital. Then we can give a greater confidence to the local tradesmen and the firms. I mean, that was one of the elements of the criteria. Obviously, they immediately passed the shovel-ready test. Others is in terms of making a contribution in some areas of the community to transforming local community infrastructure. Now, I heard some negative things being said in the House about the Christchurch project, and there's always a bit of to and fro when choices are made, but these choices reflect the ranking, by and large, associated with the work that Mark Binns did.
So, I mean, the headline is great, 20,000 jobs created, but is it accurate, Minister?
Yeah.
Or is it just a good headline?
Yeah, I really don't want to protract this element of the discussion. We have identified that figure. We have arrived at that figure as a consequence of the work carried out by Crown Infrastructure Partners It is a period of 12 months. There will be projects that may very well have to be further shaped and defined, because I've learnt the hard way through the Provincial Growth Fund that you think you have a project, and when you start to get working really closely, you discover that they don't have all of the statutory permits, or that their project plan doesn't pass muster. So I don't think anyone should be distressed by the fact that there'll be a bit of to and fro on some of these projects, and that will be addressed either by the Provincial Growth Fund or Mr. Mark Binns.
So the whole objective here is to get these projects started within 12 months. They had to be able to go within that period of time. If they don't meet that time requirement, does their money get pulled?
Well, I'm imagining for certainly a lot of the more complicated projects where there may be private capital waiting to come in following the Crown capital, then there will be inevitable negotiations. But I've been assured by Mark Binns and the Crown Infrastructure Partners that they have a template, and they'll be very firm with the people that they're working with, that the other party has to show the colour of their money. And they've got a 12-month period to demonstrate significant progress and momentum. I suspect the smaller projects, a number of them are already and waiting to go, and a host of them don't need consents at all.
So 12 projects announced today, but 150 have been approved. Why not put the list out now? Is it that you just want to travel around the country handing out money in the lead up to the election?
Well, there are a host of the projects that they inevitably will be covered by some commercial sensitivity, and we need to respect that, as we've always done through the Provincial Growth Fund. But I do think that now we've got this level of clarity and certainty, a host of the mayors from around the country, they will want to host events, and they will want to invite the politicians to come along and celebrate how they're going to turbocharge elements of their local community through this shovel-ready money. And there's nothing wrong with that. Any suggestion that it's an opportunity to sort of deliver in an Oscar Wilde fashion the sort of dance of the seven veils, I think is just tawdry criticism.
Let's talk about fisheries for a minute. So the Fisheries Minister, Stuart Nash, in this recording that has surfaced, compares the fishing sector to criminals. I think his words were, you think police deal with dodgy buggers, they've got nothing on the fisheries sector. Is he right? Do you agree with him?
Well, look, I don't want to comment directly on those remarks.
Why not?
And the person who made those remarks. I'll definitely talk about the industry. I have had a long, through my adult life, substantial interaction with the industry. I don't believe the industry contains grossly large numbers of people that are habitual lawbreakers. I think all industries have good eggs and bad eggs.
So, well, how does that work then when you have a minister who is supposed to be representing, overseeing that sector, and he's saying those things about the industry?
Well, look, I've played parliamentary rugby with Stu Nash, and he's an earthy sort of rooster, and he can answer for those remarks himself in relation to the industry. But in terms of me being an NZ First MP, and with a great knowledge of aquaculture and the fishing industry, it has not been my experience that the fishing industry is overrun with some type of Hannibal Lecter personality.
Are there too many bad eggs in the fishing industry, though?
No, I think that the regulators, they've focused on cases where there's been egregious failure to comply with the legislation from time to time. We get those court cases, but in all industries, whether it's dairy, whether it's extractive sector, whether it's horticulture, from time to time the regulators step in and they ping egregiously bad examples of non-compliant activity.
And that was the Infrastructure Minister, Shane Jones.